My name is Gregory Crafts, and I am one of your Mastermind GMs for hire here today. I am so honored to be here today with fellow GM for hire Arthur, as well as special guests Ming and Lloyd. We are here today to discuss, have a Mastermind roundtable on Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and the new character options presented in there. But more importantly, and I think the more salient point out of all of this is that Wizards of the Coast, creators or owners of Dungeons and Dragons now, the publishers, recently announced that there are no more irredeemably 100% evil races in the game anymore. And how awesome is that? So we're going to talk about that, the announcement. We're going to talk about some of the reactions to it. We're going to talk about the ramifications that it's going to have on game and mechanics, and the amazing storytelling opportunities that this now presents for all of us. So yeah, I'm so excited to be here. You guys probably know me from Monday nights. If you've been watching the Twitch, Monday nights, Brutes in the Shackled City, 7 p.m. Pacific. And I'd like to just go around real quick and let everybody else introduce themselves real fast. Let's start with Arthur.
Yeah, I'm another GM for Mastermind Adventures. My name is Arthur. I use they, them, or he, him pronouns, and I'm excited to be here for this discussion. Ming, you want to go next?
Sure. Ming Zhang, longtime game master of all kinds of games and systems, and professionally, I'm a video game writer right now. And in the past, I made the transition from business over here, so pretty exciting. Thanks for having me. And my pronouns are he, him.
Awesome, welcome, Ming. And of course, last but not least, last in the order, but first in our hearts, Lloyd. Please introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Lloyd Lamar. I am. I've known the let's say the creators, the founders of Mastermind for before they were the creators and founders of Mastermind. I'm presently a math teacher. I teach at a vocational school. I am new to Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that's going to have a very big. You'll see as we go on. I think you'll understand why as we start the discussion. I think why I'm new to it. I'm having a blast. With this, my big regret now is I could have been doing this 20 years ago. I could have very easily been doing this like 30 years ago. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited to meet all you guys and see you guys face to face and have this discussion. I think it's an important discussion that we're about to have. Greg and Arthur, I really appreciate you guys kind of pulling this together because I think this is one of those brave conversations we need to have and continue to have as we're looking to kind of make significant and systemic change. So even to see something as beautifully nerdy as Dungeons and Dragons taking a step in that direction, I'm really excited about that. So thank you guys.
Oh man, it's our pleasure to have you. And I totally feel you on the wishing to start, like you wish you'd started playing 20, 30 years ago. They always say that the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. The second best time is today. So, right. I think you're coming in at a lovely nexus point of, of like geek culture and pop culture intertwining, and that the fact that art has reflected life in D&D for a very long time. And now it really is reflecting the life and the times currently. I think with some of these changes, if for those of you who are just joining us or don't know, I also have the chat window up here live on the stream. So we would love to have you guys interact with us. Feel free to say hello, tell us where you're at, and let us know what kind of character you guys like to play in the chat, because we'd love to just kick the ball down, get it rolling here. But like I was saying, for those of you who don't know, Wizards of the Coast recently put out a press release a couple of months ago now that they acknowledge the fact that a lot of character types, races, and characters like groups like the Vistani or orcs even and drow were all based on cultural stereotypes that were reflective of the times in which they were created. And in an effort to move forward, they have really taken the time to reassess that and to update those points of view within the materials. I know that in Curse of Strahd recently they've really rewritten a lot of the stuff pertaining to the Vistani in order to remove the negative Romani stereotypes that they were based on. But I think it's far more interesting when they take something as a blanket statement, like no more inherently evil races. Nobody is just no one race is just irredeemably evil anymore, the way orcs or drow or goblins were portrayed. And they say that, no, they're just as interesting and diverse and unique, and everybody has their own individual point of view just as much as the normal PCs do and the PC races do. So, yeah, what's your guys' reactions to that, just off the top?
For me personally, being new to this, so a lot of that history I'm completely unfamiliar with. So when I started, I didn't know there were these hang-ups or these classifications for different things. So when I developed my first character, it's funny, for people who've been playing for a while, I got some strange looks like, I don't know if that's a thing,
What kind of character did you make?
So I created a half-orc wizard.
Okay.
But here's the tricky part. I guarantee you 9 out of 10 of your funny looks that you got were because the mechanics of the half-orc, right? Forget that it's a half-orc. The robot mold that would become your character had built-in mechanics that didn't favor, the wizard. And
although what wizard doesn't benefit from a +2 to con, But at least they don't have penalties, because back all the way up to, I want to say, at least through 3.5, I can't remember if 4th edition had this or not, but some races had negative penalties to stats as well as bonuses. So you would have they would reinforce the stereotype of the dumb orc by everybody, but all of them having an intelligence penalty, which, as you know, is the main stat for a wizard. So,
but even so, the idea is that nowadays you have people who don't ever intend to be, prejudiced or racist or anything close to that, perpetuating this race exceptionalism,
right?
Just by virtue of the mechanics, right?
Right.
And
So back to the earlier point, the reason I like all of this is that there's a framework in Dungeons and Dragons. So and the little bit I know about the framework, it's very exhaustive. There's a fluidity to it that I think is very classic. It's beautiful, right? But there's a construct that exists in our real worlds, and you've just already mentioned it. If life now reflects, this game, sometimes we think the things I'm seeing in this game reflect life.
Yeah.
And so when they make a huge change like this, we're now, I don't know, we're in a place where we can grow away from, well, if this man is good with kids, he must be, if this woman likes to build something, she must be, instead of defining people by what we think something is, I think we're moving into this space where we're just going to let people be people.
Yeah, and what was that, Arthur?
To Ming's point about getting weird looks for kind of not optimizing your stats, I think that comes from the perspective of going into Dungeons and Dragons as, let me make the most powerful character I possibly can by using the mechanics to build sort of mid-max, as we like to say. Versus, I find it more interesting to make a unique character, and characters are built on contrast and interesting things. I think that even the like less racist mentality of, well, your character is not optimized, is a thought that I would even suggest people stay away.
Hold on. I just want to clarify. I think it's equivalently racist. They just don't intend it to be.
Oh yeah, because it's racism. It's racism in a way that's kind of reinforced by the mechanics. It's kind of like you're being lured into something that was formed from a racist trope. It's like reading that article of like 10 phrases that you didn't know were racist. Number 7's going to shock you. You know, they're number 7 legitimately shocked me. You know, like there were things that I didn't even realize had really awful roots to them and really awful connotations that have just been commonly accepted by society. And for the longest time, these stereotypes based on, oh, you're an orc, that means you must be exceptionally strong. Oh, you're a high elf, that means that you're haughty and you have you're ethereally beautiful. And oh, you're a half elf, that means that the elves reject you. That means what's that?
Let's get some ugly half elves over here.
But the half elves are either like universally ignored by both their human and their elven heritage, or they're the perfect diplomat, even though they go between worlds but never fit into one. You know, it's all these, or the fact that orcs are literally designed for you to be able to kill them without consequence. You know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is deeply rooted in, and then you go into why were the orcs created? Like who came up with them, and what was the stuff behind that? You look into the origins and the roots of these races. Dwarves were of course of Norse mythology, but when they were brought into into the mainstream via Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, he openly admits that he based them on some anti-Semitic tropes. You know, not that he's an anti-Semite, but he based them on.
No, he pretty much is, right. It's like, I love Ender's Game, but Orson Scott Card got some
you got to admit that all your favorites are problematic. You know, it's true.
Right. So, and if we were going by mythology, right, like the dwarves in Norse mythology were probably actually just elves.
Yeah. Hey, writers or men, it's not that hard not to be shitty.
But and this is the thing when we're dealing with a game system, a storytelling system with its roots in culture that 50, 60, 70 years ago of pop culture, which was very, very different than today. So in addition to today, in addition to WotC coming around and doing this today, I think it's welcome. I also think it's long overdue, but unfortunately, change, at least in corporate culture change, is slow.
The market wasn't really receptive to it until a couple of years ago, and they're reacting to it, right? Which is, for all that I applaud this step, I think it's really the first tiny step that they need to acknowledge, right? They still have tons of ingrained culture in all the races. So we look at Tasha. Not only is it optional rules, right? So DMs can just ignore it, but also the fact that every race has these ingrained concepts still within them, even though they changed it with the stats, means that there are still problems with the intersection of optimization and culture, right? And so without getting into that, though, I think there's a point that I want to raise about the storytelling opportunity, right? That goes beyond just, hey, it's more interesting to have a character that's weak, right? Because we're all sick of playing power fantasies. But like, the game is founded on, has a war game origin. So D&D itself is very tactical, and because it has a war game origin, the power fantasy is unavoidable until you get to a comfort level where you're trying to break the default experience, right? And so the storytelling opportunity is really for folks who are not mainstream. And I'll give you a very clear example about this. Let's take your half elf, right? You play a half elf. You're torn between two societies. You have the rigid, haughty elves who value magic, and the rugged, flexible humans, and you're not
who are good at everything by default. Yeah.
Or who are up and coming, these upstart young races, and you're torn between these two societies. You have you want to live with the humans, but you want to be accepted with the elves, and you're cast out of one, and the other never sees you as one of them. And like, that is an amazing storytelling potential for, we'll say, a white man to play, right? But if, as an Asian person who immigrated here, who is when I go to China, I'm not seen as Chinese, I'm seen as American, and when I'm here, I'm seen as non-white.
It's literally,
that's just my life.
Experience.
So there's no actual fantasy for me to play a half elf.
Oh God, so it really is racial cosplay in a way.
Yeah, so
Oh, that's
again,
effed up.
I don't actually think racial cosplay is as bad an issue as people make it out to be because it does actually develop empathy. It's like the baby bottle, right? But what I will say is that when I play D&D, I do not want to just be me,
Fair.
right? Right?
Yeah.
So again, let's take the example of like the noble bastard, right? Like or some story where you're an outcast, like you're the fish out of water story, right? You're the one Viking in the desert setting or whatever.
Like
Like
13th
that's
Warrior.
really exciting if you're constantly accepted all the time. But if you are already an outcast, the fantasy is that you are accepted, that you
Yeah.
can just go about your job, whatever healer, mage, fighter, whatever, and be excellent at it, and no one bats an eye that you are excellent at it. So to use your half orc wizard example, the fantasy is not that this half orc defied his people, became a wizard against all expectations because either he was special or, through grit or whatever, and earned the acceptance. Like that's not a fantasy. That's
Yeah. And
that's people's lived experiences, right?
so,
The
so
fantasy is you're half orc and nobody blinks an eye at that.
right. And so it's funny you mentioned that because when I designed the character, and it's funny, I didn't realize I was doing this as I designed the character. So for myself, being a person of color for 49 years, people have made assumptions of me because of what they saw. But then when they got to know me, they were like, "Oh, wait a minute, we didn't realize, and it was just like, well, just get to know me." So for many years of my life, I hid my nerdiness. I camouflaged it as perfectly as I could, and I was the athlete. I was the outspoken person, but people didn't realize that I was an artist. I didn't realize I was an artist. Through photography, through like I've always loved to build things, but if I didn't think that was accepted, I had to hide it. And so my character is just a reflection of me. This is what you see on the outside, but this character is a wizard because of, in a lot of ways, it has to do with even the conflict of my own parents, how they compromised, to kind of navigate me through the world. And so I'm enjoying, what I'm seeing with, Dungeons and Dragons because as this story goes, I get to win. I get to write it. I get to say the stuff that I wish I could have said over the last 49 years without the consequence of, well, you're Black, you can't do that. You're limited here. So for me, I've had people get promotions, be promoted, be elevated, who weren't nearly as talented as me because they weren't Black. I've had administrators laugh and say, "Ha, you did all the work, and I'll get all the credit."
Yep.
To my face, and they thought it was funny. I'm like, that's not funny.
Yep. But, I can relate, man.
and there was no consequence for it. So now I'm playing this D&D game, and I'm playing with my daughter is playing with me, and it's hysterical. We made a similar character, and we didn't have conversations. So she came up with a half elf, half orc as well, but her half orc isn't interested in fighting. And so as I'm sitting back watching her character develop, I'm like, I think that
we do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think these changes for and I appreciate you mentioning this. For these changes, if people choose to accept them, if people actually choose to play by them, are going to have an impact, on culture. Because now that I'm embracing my nerdiness, I wear it like a badge of honor. You
But
know?
but the value of these changes is the same reason why we say everybody should share their pronouns, right? It's not because a tool for the people who need it. It's actually cover for the people who need it, right? Because if sharing your pronouns is like, "Hi, I'm Ming, he, him," if that just becomes normal, then suddenly it's not weird for anybody to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if we extrapolate that lesson to D&D, if suddenly it's just whatever. Like it doesn't matter if you're a half orc or a Goliath or a Yuan-Ti. Like there's all equivalently okay wizards. That doesn't actually do anything for your character. But what it does is it removes it strips away the intertextual, we'll call it, sorry for a technical term, intertextual bias that carries with it, right? Think of it as the baggage.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a magic dwarf. People aren't like, oh, these greedy dwarves can't be wizards, right? Like it becomes the whole thing because you're giving cover for richer storytelling. So you're actually helping other people rather than the people like that you think.
And you touched on something there, Ming, and I even just want to just acknowledge real quick that the personal pronouns thing, that makes perfect sense to me. And I don't know, I've been working in the arts out here in Los Angeles for years, and I've always been like, yeah, always supportive of people sharing their personal pronouns. I've never thought of it as a big deal for me to share my own. But now I'm like, God, that just makes perfect sense, just to make a more comfortable environment for everybody else, just to put it out there, whether it's because I think when everybody looks at me, they see, straight white guy, got it, so that's just the natural, that's just the, I just assume that's what people assume, and that's not always,
it's also the fact that there could be people who look just like you who do not identify as a straight white guy.
That is true.
Right. So it's cover for others.
If you make it clear, and those other people don't have to fight against that as well.
It's sort of like the idea of the safety pin years ago when back in 2016 when everybody was like, if you wore a safety pin, it was just like a small visual signal that it was like it's cool. I'm an ally. I want to be supported. You guys hadn't heard about this, or was this just something?
No. But I think, see, the trick is you get everybody to wear the safety pins, and suddenly they're very meaningful, right?
That is true. Yeah.
If it's only like if you flipped it and you said, hey, if you need an ally, wear a safety pin.
No. It was always meant for someone.
No.
Wanted to show.
I understand. Yeah. I'm saying if it was flipped, it wouldn't have a fraction of the impact.
Yeah.
I remember my friends at the time saying why wear a safety pin that can be excused as just wearing a safety pin versus wear a Black Lives Matter pin. No one can look at that and think you anything else. That's how you be a real ally. Because if you're wearing a safety pin, people can look at that and be like, you're just wearing a safety pin versus it makes it very clear which side you're on if you're wearing a Black Lives Matter pin.
That is true.
But I think to that point, I guess there's an interesting question of if as the optional rules currently are, it's basically ignore the rules, put numbers wherever you want, which feels like a kind of a non-answer, which is what do you do about this inherently racist system of giving certain numbers to certain people? It's just ignore it. But what do you do when all the races I guess the question is in my mind is, what is the difference between why choose one race over the other?
Well, first of all, they are nowhere close to differentiating the race to
No, I agree, but in that world where there's not I think stats are one thing, but there's also some races have great weapon fighting just as a racial trait, which is really good to me.
It's super weird.
Stats I can almost.
What's the trope that you were talking about, Arthur? It was everybody. The Planet of Hats. Yeah.
Yeah. The Planet of Hats trope is basically the idea that you go to a planet and everyone wears the same hat. They act the same. And it's the kind of evil racist thing. Like, oh yeah, you see any drow and they'll be shifty. They'll probably try to steal your stuff. Like you go to a dwarven commune and they'll be kind of rigid and prudish, and
They're
they'll
all
love
Scottish,
metalwork
and they're
and
all
kind of
alcoholics. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Planet of Hats. It's like, this is a really boring game because the second I meet a dwarf, I know exactly the way you're going to act, just based on dumb old tropes. Versus like, I don't know if these dwarves are going to be like super nice, or maybe this is a group of just shady evil dwarves, or maybe this is a group of shady evil humans, because most humans end up being evil anyway.
Well, again, it comes back to the point of view that the game takes, right? So I talked about the game is quite excellent for white men, and I don't want to take that away from white people. Right?
Don't worry, we've got plenty. You could take whatever you need.
No, but my point is, I don't want to take that away because it does a really good job of that perspective, right? Like it does a really good job of perspective. And so what I want to do is expand the perspective. And the reason I'm focusing on perspective is this. The Planet of the Hats trope is a problem, not because it's using sweeping terms to describe a culture. It's a problem because the point of view it adopts is an external evaluator reducing a culture to nothing but a couple of elements, right? So think about it like this. When you roll a character, you inhabit this role and you go, I am, Hrothor, the Snake Man Ranger or whatever. And in your mind, you probably had a family, you probably had a background, probably some bad stuff happened to you that caused you to be a psychopathic adventurer. But in general, you're pretty fleshed out. And so as you inhabit this role, you go, okay, all this stuff happened. And so now whenever I meet an external thing, which is a culture, I go to Waterdeep, I go to whatever city, I take my character as I understand them, whether it's very deep or very shallow, and I push it against this society, and we have a pure interaction. But that is a first-person perspective. What happens because of the construction of the game is that when you play a human, or in some cases like elf and half-elf, because they're human adjacent, you are like that. When you play an orc, when you play dark elves, when you play a gnome, you are actually playing a third person. So think about it like this. You're all playing a video game. And some of you, when you play this video game, it's a first-person shooter. You are in the body of the character. And others, you are playing a third-person RPG where it's Geralt of Rivia or, Cloud, right? Like nobody plays Final Fantasy VII and goes like, I'm Cloud. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but generally people play it and they go, I'm following this other character's story. So now if half the party, if all the further away from the humanist, the default race you get, the further it becomes a third person perspective, that's where the issues come, because now you are playing as you're doing the cultural cosplay for some people, and other people you aren't. And so the key is, if you're playing a half orc or a Yuan-Ti or a flying bird man or whatever, like play it from within that culture, right? And so like the anthropology of that culture involves looking at it from within. So it's not that all the dwarves love metalworking as a problem. It's that if you look at it from an outsider, you go, these dwarves, they're all about metalworking, nothing else to them. Versus from the inside, you go, my society loves metalworking because we come from the deep earth. And it's because we come from this place that we love metalworking, which means that all these other things that we love are a factor of where we came from.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the old improv rule: if this is true, what else is true? And you take that.
Exactly.
Oh God, yeah.